It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever we are on this beautiful blue planet, whatever longitude, whatever latitude you reside. Discoveries abound. Our world is changing. Is it noticeable now, or is it just me? Seems like the energy flow is in movement. Whatever form that takes, there's definitely change in the air. Now, a lot of people could be focused on the stories that are fed to us, or you could tap into those other energies and also feel them if you're not looking at a device and you're looking at people around you. Things are definitely shifting. Change of an age, change of atmospheric jet stream flows because of the ice crystal clouds in the mesosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption 1 year ago today. That was actually a few days back, but we didn't have a program then. But exactly almost 1 year. So what will that bode for Southern Hemisphere crop production, food prices for the rest of the year? The awareness of massively increasing food prices, and then how people are going to react with this, perhaps by spending on other things, maybe getting ready for the same changes that you feel, the static in the air. I'm right here tonight, Ransom, Godwin joining me as always, just trying to make sense of this world and how do we protect our families, our friends, ourselves. How do we get our communities ready? How do we even get this world ready for what we're embarking into? Because what we're about to see and experience, well, that's something that we haven't seen in thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands, maybe not that long, but definitely a longer time frame than any of us have ever been alive to see the change. And many of us multi-centuries. And how many generations would that be? 7, 8 generations prior? That's the type of change we're about to see. So anyway, Ransom, thank you for joining tonight. I forgot to add you in when I do. I was in a rush. There you are, man. Hey, thank you for joining. Okay, there you go. That a little technical glitch there. Thanks for popping on tonight. You know, the energy is changing. You feel it. I feel it. Is it numerology? It's 22. Or on my phone, when I look, it's an hour earlier, 11:11. And then there's 2 3s, 22:03, 11:03. The numbers, man, it's vibration and frequency and the numbers.
I must have missed something there. I thought you were giving me my birthday. 11:30s, those are my numbers.
Yeah, because I have my phone. It's programmed for 2 different time zones, and I didn't switch one back, which is now 2 hours difference because I just remembered it as 1 hour. So when I look at my phone, right, I get both of those times on. Hey, Ransom, you there?
So yeah.
Okay, yeah, man. Take the floor. Take the floor for a minute.
Okay, I just missed what you were talking about, so I didn't know if you were asking me a question there. I had a couple seconds
Man,
delay.
People miss what I'm talking about all the time. You're welcome to the club.
Well, I skipped over from the broadcast to the Skype, and there's a little bit of a delay, so I thought I missed something. What was going on? Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. So, yeah. Have you been to just by chance, I did hear when you were talking about rising food prices there a second ago. We went shopping the other day, and this is supposedly like a day after they got their truck at Walmart. And we are kind of a secluded town. However, um, when we got in there, there was like no meat, no chicken, no pork, no organic food of any kind. So you could just scratch that off the list. And then, of course, because I'm on the internet all the time, I've been watching the egg prices go and, skyrocketing everywhere and freaking out. It's like the toilet paper episode a couple of years ago. But this time, if you really think about what they're hitting, because we've talked about this in the past, about when things are starting to get bad as far as food accumulation and you haven't been growing your own, um, you may run out of protein. And we've talked about this starving the public out, because that's what I feel like actually, the backbone of the Great Reset is first starvation, which, globally will lower health of people globally and their lifespans. And they're mixing all of these other things in there. So every indication I've been looking at in the news recently, it's kind of all coming together for me, the idea or the Great Reset, and in the way that I think they're actually going to do it. And the backbone of all of it is the reduction of food availability globally. So no matter where you live, they are going to try to set up a situation where supply and demand don't match at all, where there's a super supply. No supply available for the demand of people that are starting to get hungry now. So everybody started kind of rolling with the beef prices going up and the pork prices going up and even the chicken prices going up. And, you've always had that backup protein of eggs and like peanut butter. And if you've been to the store, you realize that they are gouging now on these eggs and stuff, trying to use artificial reasons, like they're trying to blame it on avian flu and this and that. But if you recall, a couple of years ago, and we brought this up at the time, 2020 and 2021, both years actually, they were destroying millions and millions and millions of different kinds of fowl worldwide in this fear of avian flu, which directly links to the mechanism that they're using to do the Great Reset. But in order for this to work, in order for everyone to become in a situation that they have bad health, first you have to attack their nutritional needs. And you can do that simply through inflating or collapsing the dollar. And I wanted to get your opinion on what I think was a major red flag that just happened a few days ago, actually like 2 days ago or whatever, when the Bank of America and their partnership with the financial company Zelly that lets you send money back and forth, and you can have big accounts and pay your bills with it, your utility bills and stuff. It's set up with that. Millions of people woke up to find that they had nothing in their accounts. They probably had the overwhelming realization that the idea of their fiat paper money disappeared overnight, at least for them. And I'm sure it was a real panic, especially if they had any amount of money in those accounts, like any large amount of money. I've seen, hundreds of people tweeting about how they couldn't pay their bills, how they were going into debt like really fast. Things were starting to get turned off. They were worried about, what was happening to payments that had already been posted. So they were posted when there was money in the account, and then they just wake up. Now the bank says it was just a glitch, and that they've fixed it, and supposedly the people have their money back in their accounts now. But it does show you that overnight, in an instant, their fiat, paper money system is actually digital zeros and ones, and they just went to zero, which shows you that at any time the financial market could shut down, which brings me to the World Economic Forum and how they're openly talking about cutting the meat usage of billions of people, how they're talking about reducing land that people can farm on, to help the planet. All of these ideas that they're bringing forth. And we've talked about the technological tracking and manipulation of the genetic, biosphere before. But they're just talking on the simple terms on some of the other talks about, decreasing meat, making people eat bugs, all of these things, which are obviously what they're talking about is the starvation of the world, because it's the World Economic Forum. And you're also hearing echoes of what I warned about last week. Klaus Schwab was talking about that the COVID would just be a blimp on history because the impending danger is a cyber attack that shuts down everything, all of it, the power, etc., nuclear plants. You can imagine some of the things that can go wrong whenever the grid goes down. We see that sometimes with weather-related phenomenon, etc. But what they are talking about is a global shutdown because of some kind of mythological enemy that's going to do that. Now, it's no big deal that he just mentioned it in a sentence, I guess. But now I saw a whole entire presentation on the topic, and it eerily seems a lot like the Event 201. But this time they're doing it a little more in your face, where they're saying, no, we're talking about real scenarios and real fears and possibly real events in the near future. And they showed the other day with Bank of America and the Zelly that your money can just disappear, which means you can't go get things that you don't have. And that goes from everything from food to any kind of survival gear, gasoline, all of it. Every avenue of our human domain, if you don't have some kind of reserves, some kind of idea of what you're going to do in that scenario, they totally have the globe at their mercy, because, there's all of these different things going on in the background, and we'll get into it in a minute. And one of the main things, too, that I see that now clearly is that they've created an artificial interdependent system between China and the Western world, where when one fails, the other fails. And that's what we're about to see, because that seems to be the plan, and it's totally related to the recent, medical situation that the world has undergone. I know that was a lot, but there you go.
Oh man, I can digest. I can take big chunks like at Christmas dinner. The thing about the money is and you start to see the cyber thing happening. The preparation from the airlines. Now I gotta, the reason that fits so well with what I would like to say is, of those of you, the reason I was bringing up the Hunga Tonga eruption in 2022 was because it was the largest water vapor ejecta into the upper atmosphere. It's a layer called the mesosphere, and it's the last layer before it goes and edges out into space. It's about 85 kilometers or somewhere north of that, going up to, even if you would like to say 80 miles, if it clears up to about 95 kilometers, we're in that same range. The water was ejected up there. And the Hunga Tonga eruption put 10% of the world's moisture levels into the atmosphere and added another 10%. So we're actually at 110% based on, say, the last 200 years or the last 150 years of how much water vapor is in the atmosphere. We just added 10% in a single day. And that has since had a chance to play out over the last 1 year. So these things that we're going to see, and I kind of lost my thought trying to explain with the Hunga Tonga eruption there. The ice crystals that are forming in these noctilucent clouds or polar stratospheric clouds, you could call them both, there is going to be a larger amount of chemical reaction on the ice crystal surfaces, depleting and destroying ozone with the chlorine and the bromine. This is going to turn into a large reduction in ozone, and it'll baffle scientists as to how it's happening, why it's happening. And that also moves weather patterns around, changes weather patterns, moves jet streams. Mainly precipitation is what we're looking at. So when you see all these things about the food shortages and what is happening, and then we have the ramp up in medical emergencies as of late, So now you're going to dovetail these two things on top of it. So the UV is going to increase in the southern hemisphere on the crops, which will be greatly weakened because the growing conditions are atrocious at best this year. A huge amount of new, very amplified UV rolling in at the same time. Now, the lowest of the ozone hole, at least from my research, what they have from satellite records, etc., from the chlorofluorocarbons. Now, really, was that a thing, or is this a natural cycle also based off magnetic fields? When the sun's magnetic field as well, with the amount of energy inbound and outbound, no less, coming off of our planet, radiating out to space. Now, is this a natural cycle too, where it goes and it grows and then it shrinks? But if you knew that that ozone depletion was a natural cycle in itself, you could write on top of that and say ozone, chlorofluorocarbons. You could bend, industry and move it the way you wanted. You could create this fear base to keep going off of, which is something that we've seen with the global warming all the time. But now, how do they explain rapid cooling from this point? Year without a summer inbound in the northern hemisphere, crop loss across the planet, UV increases out of nowhere, boom. It's really not that the UV would just decrease because of man-made influences. It's because there's so much water vapor ejected into the mesosphere and the stratosphere, which is the layer below that. That gives us all these extra surfaces to do more chemical breakdown of the ozone and deplete it. Now, the ozone hole was recovering, and the United Nations said it was going to recover, and it was all on the road to recovery. And I am unequivocally saying, I can't say exactly by December 31st this year, but within the next, say, 12 to 24 months, there's going to be a rapid decline in the ozone, and they just won't be able to explain it. But that will wrap into more crop shortages because the UV, and watch how they run with the UV on this thing. I mean, these layers within layers and the dovetailing of this World Economic Forum riding on top of these cycles to implement their policies. Like for me, I step back and look at it and go, all right, they understand this was going to be a time of a change of a grand solar minimum coming in anyway. 400-year cycle that would destroy food production globally, and it would cause mass unrest with not only our modern economy, our modern supply chains, and just civilization itself. If you knew the onset dates of that, well, you would, if you were this global elite vampire class of wealth extraction and energy extraction of the planet, you could move, bend, and morph based on the natural cycle. And all I'm seeing right now is knock-ons of knock-ons of knock-ons of the same natural cycle being ridden on top of to achieve agendas. The whole nitrogen thing and removing because of nitrogen and the farmers, et cetera, in Europe and the Netherlands, they want to put a megalopolis city between 5 countries there. And the farmers stand in the way of putting housing for extra several million people to go into these areas. This is how this 15-minute city plan is coming together. We're getting sort of sold a false bill of goods by what they're trying to imprint into your mind of a 15-minute city. A 15-minute city is not just like it's happening in Oxford, a 15-minute city. It is going to be a megalopolis of 100 million people of 5 connected countries. The 100 million to 120 million will be like Belgium, Denmark, Holland, parts of Germany, Luxembourg, parts of northern France. And that'll all be one giant habitation zone. But within that habitation zone, then you're going to get your 15 minutes of zone within that zone. Now, they have one also planned down for Africa, which they think would reach anywhere to about 300 million, it was 30 million, 120, and it was large. It was like about 280 to 300 million people living in the zone, because this encompassed 5 different countries, from Nigeria all the way across through Central Africa, and what you would think of like French-controlled nations down there as well. And it's going to be a highway corridor, trade corridor of just massive cities. So again, the 15-minute zone would exist within this 250 million to 300 million people city zone that is already planned for Africa as well. They could never get away with it without first controlling the food and knowing the cycles of how this change would be implemented at these certain junctures right now. So we're coming into a juncture, and even though I forgot I was trying to connect to something else there at Ransom, but that happens to me sometimes. I get on a tangent. I should have written down my second point. I thought I could just remember it, but you know where we are tonight. But these kind of zonal areas and the control of food on the known cycle inbound. So, you know, with the research within the next 24 months, 12 to 24, I'm going to say by August, because generally the ozone hole reaches its largest width and thinnest of it in the atmosphere beginning August, and then it rolls through like late October in the southern hemisphere. So for us to witness this, we have to wait until August. So I've been trying to dig into a lot of ozone studies. There seems to be a lot of missing data from last year. I wonder why. You know, like when there's a solar flare and they get a sun-diving comet, you look at like SOHO is the best one to go to. But there's missing data everywhere. You know, when that sun grazer, that sun diver comes in and creates a CME with a little tiny comet of the size of like a football field going into something like the size of the sun, that millions of Earths could squeeze into, that little tiny comet creates a huge CME. Something electrical happens off the sun's surface when that happens. So if you knew these changes were here, you could expect the amplification of these same changes, because the largest eruption in 200 years, well, that would be an expected effect of a grand solar minimum entry. And so would larger earthquakes, like massive, massive tectonic activity way above the normal. So how would you bake that into your algorithm if you're going to do some sort of plan or change based on events? Not exact time, but then you need the time inside the event if you're planning like the WEF were. So now that we've had the largest eruption in 200 years, we know that certain things are going to happen. So anybody out there that has any kind of gumption or motivation to go look into your local library online or go visit it to find journals and writings of the years 1817 and 1818 in your local area, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Because the eruption of Tambora occurred in 1815, and then the subsequent 1 year, which we're coming into right now, our planting season, which is very similar to what happened in Tambora. We're coming into our planting season now 1 year after the eruption, which was the year without a summer in 1816. Frosts in July, and then what we consider now New England. These points can be mapped to. So the closest I would say is, you know, what we could experience. It's not going to be the same in any way, shape, or form. It'll be a variant of. It'll be something similar to, but not exact. What was the journal reports of anybody living in 1817, 1816? That's what the weather is going to be generally like. So if they talked about how the ice storms blew in and people who lived there the whole life couldn't find their way from the apple tree out in front of their front porch back in, and they froze to death within those 100 feet of an apple tree in their front porch that they knew for their entire life. That kind of swift inbound, kind of really strange events. What was that called? The children's blizzard. These kind of strange things, you would expect it. Like, it's warm now, it's cold now, it's warm now. These are kind of the weird effects. Something's definitely changed, flipped, and shifted. So then you have to look at, like how fast is the World Economic Forum trying to implement these things? And I really highly doubt they're in a defensive posture at the moment. There's so much information coming out. The internet has allowed so much freedom of sharing of ideas to expound on And knowing the natural cycles, the World Economic Forum is riding on top of natural cycles. There's nothing man-made in this. It's the sun, it's the electromagnetic field, it's the different layers in our atmosphere, it's how electrically those are bound together and form tight patterns that will stay for centuries, or that magnetic decoupling happens and those jet streams and cloud cells move into completely different areas because they're not magnetically bound anymore. They can go where they want to, but they're going to start to run into other cloud layers and patterns and jet streams in the atmosphere, and that's when we get these ringouts and we get 1,000 years worth of rain in a single storm. Those kind of once in 1,000-year storms. That's a result of the uncoupling magnetically and then weather patterns shifting to different areas within the atmosphere. Well, that's a cycle. You would know that would happen when we come into a grand solar minimum. And everything I see from this point forward is World Economic Forum struggling to try to implement new policies. So they need a blackout so people can't communicate about what they're doing. So you can see the same thing now. If they really want to bring in and try to, it's already come to the edge where people are starting to battle back now. You know, it's really starting to be going, you know, politicians are getting called out in office like, yo, you're part of the WEF. What's going on? You're allegiant to a global governance system, not our own nation. What's up, bro? In your face, at their offices, in front of their homes, in their restaurants. It's happening everywhere, which is a good thing. So now it's getting close. They probably have, you know, a timeline themselves on the awareness and the awakening of humanity and when they would need to try to implement a blackout, because then you could, if you don't have ham, if you don't have CB, shortwave, longwave, radio, then what? How are you going to communicate? Well, it'll be back to newspapers and you get the state news. They're on a time clock too. These cycles are, the way it's coming in right now, the food shortages are going to overcouple with the rising spikes in, let's say, people that didn't expect to visit the hospital after they went to the hospital for the last 2 years to get the jabba dabba doo. That's going to be rising at the same time, the awareness, and then we get the global famine coming in, or not famine, just food distress to points we've never seen it in our lives, disruptions, food price increases like we never lived through this before. Even our grandparents, great-grandparents, we're talking like 7, 8 generations back that witnessed something like this. At that point, if you put a blackout in, it would be disrupted already anyway, to the point where if you weren't self-sufficient, you weren't making it. So, yeah, we sit here in this timeline. So Ransom, I was trying to go somewhere with that deep thought, and I just kind of got, oh, who knows? I'm in the stratosphere, man.
Well, I've been paying attention to them, so they do have a timeline, and it's not an overnight timeline. You know, like if we look at the Ukraine situation, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there's some odd stuff going on that kind of is, to me, obvious verification of my theories that I've already had, which is that they're trying to set this up kind of to be the look at this over here while everything else is set up around the world. And they have several of these that I think that they're going to do in a row. And it all ties into basically starving the people out. You know, I talk a lot about how they've been manipulating the DNA of not only people, but the plants, the animals, etc. And I think the reason that they're doing this is because they're trying to hitchhike on, like you said, the cycle that they already know is going on. So it's a completely natural cycle that's happening, and they know that. So what they're trying to do is hijack it and use it for their own goals, which seems to be the worldwide reduction of population, you know, to reduce the number of people on the planet. And then secondly, set up a new civilization that is more of a technocratic, top-down servitude, and instead of being like physical slaves or being mistreated, you know, like that, this will be a mandatory customer-based authoritarianism, the reset on the other side of it. And the reason I say that is because that every, you know, aspect of the way that we're used to living right now is being corporatized in a scientific, technocratic way. So just to start off, you know, and I've talked about it many times, the manipulation of people, plants, they're planning on mRNAing everything. That means everything that you're interacting with, they're going to put their own special ingredients, let's just say. Let's start off with this. So we have the world's first bee vaccine receives USDA conditional license. That means they're going to be allowed to play around with that. So, why is that important? Well, like I do, that bees are the pollinators, and the bees will touch everything that we eat everywhere. Without the bees, we wouldn't be having fresh fruits or anything that comes from a flower, because the bees are helping us, pollinate and make sure that we have another generation of food to eat. So, what better way to inject, so to speak, new behaviors or conditions with the bee by manipulating it in different ways? It's kind of woo-woo, but follow me here. So we have a global situation of the same kind of, plot against the bees, but this one's against people, against the food we eat, against the animals that are out there. If you've listened to Mr. Gates, speeches on how he wants to help all the animals out there by giving them these new vaccines, then you can see that, these are just good-hearted people at the top that are just trying to medicate the entire biome of the planet, including your lettuces and whatnot. So then in the backdrop, we have, the drama of geopolitical situations, the pandemic that we've had. We'll just go ahead and call it their terminology. So in China, it seems like, in my opinion, that this is ultimately a perfect plan, and I'm starting to see all the mechanics of it. So the World War II generation basically is gone now. And that's when this campaign started kind of changing. And in 2000, right before they went, their sons or grandsons, more like, got an opportunity to be super patriotic on 2001. Some things were set up. Governments changed, namely America changed to a more totalitarian type top-down federal government. After which, we had 20 years of changing of culture and the geopolitical situation of the world. So that was the prime at the beginning. And what the reasoning is now that I see is that they needed to move all of the military age men out of a certain area and move them to another area where they will be changing the geopolitical situation there too, meaning that the populations in the European countries, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, have been fading in recent years due to whatever you want to blame it on. I have my own ideas on that as well, but anyway, they were having less children. They're not able to have as many children. So the population of those countries were already on the first bell curve of depopulation, and that includes the U.S., Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, all of the people in the new alliance that supposedly is our side of things. All of those countries were having this issue with population and reduction. So obviously, if you move millions and millions of people that haven't yet been sterilized, I guess that's the right word, you move them in there, they have no jobs. There's going to be a food epidemic, heating problems, cut off the power now is in this situation, and then they bring war. So what you have there is a perfect situation for destabilization in Europe. So it seems that the invasion of the Middle East by Western powers had little to do with the Middle East itself, but rather the destabilization of Europe and Eastern Europe for the current situation that we're in with the Ukraine and Russia, and this is how it all ties together. You needed another catalyst to get rid of certain portions of the population, and this would be the older people that actually own lands, have bank accounts, have resources, have know-how. These are the people that, like I said, the end of the World War II generation, so to speak, in all of the Western countries was coming to an end here recently. I just saw one of the last ones die in the United States. There was in the news. And then you pull this culture shock over here. And then we have a pandemic that seems to go after a certain people. And this is my theory, is that this thing originated in the United States as a bioweapon. And then when it went to China, it was manipulated once again and sent back into the world. And I don't think that this is a back and forth that enemies do, but rather a cooperation of a planned result of the entire world. So if both countries have their own attacks on the vulnerable populations, it changes the dynamic of financial, land distribution, all of these other powers that age group and those vulnerable people had. Now they're gone. So now there's a, so to speak, replacement of people at a certain age that will not get along with the other people. And China, they have enough people to just get rid of them without needing to have people come in and have destabilization in that way. And it seems that they've set up this intertwined, interdependent system between the West and China so that they both fail at the same time. And then you top on, hunger. But this recent medical thing that's went around seems to be resurging in China. China can take the hit, however. But as certain people on the internet have pointed out, they're moving. A lot of people are going to certain places, i.e., the Western powers like Australia, South Korea, Japan, and those strains are spreading there now. So what you have is an exported problem and an internal problem with China. And then we're setting it up on the other side because there's only one player left that really can, hold their own and retreat back into the Siberian area and just wait it out. And that's Russia. So they are the ones that are not playing. And I have a feeling that they're going to get backstabbed, so to speak, by the other side. And I've been watching where all of the weapons recently have been going. I found a graph that showed me where all of them are going. So these are the same countries that have all three problems: a situation of combat that's brewing, a pandemic that takes out specific portions of the population, and an ever-growing shutdown economy related to food and energy. If there's no other clear sign that the plug has been pulled and the population reduction program has begun, with all parties seemingly participating in it, because it seems like the little back and forth of the pandemic hit the countries in just the right way. The free Western countries introduced Chinese-style lockdowns for their countries and mandates, rules, etc. That shows participation from the West. And then in China, they were more than happy to export plenty of people to spread certain strains around the world. And that is being repeated right now. So not only are you worried about a pandemic as far as human beings are concerned, but now they are reducing the amount of food worldwide and replacing it with engineered food. And whenever they talk about the Ukraine and some of these other problems that they're having, it seems that they have a 5 to 15-year plan. So this isn't something that, we're just going to see in the next 2 years and people are all going to get mad because it's not happening. They're going with the long, successful trend of incrementalism, where you're shocked daily. They have it down to like an exact formula to keep the populations of the world antagonized, distracted, and sick. And this is only going to continue in that direction. So the only opt-out of the entire program is to protect yourself and your family, and plan on that these things are real. So your milk, your meat, your vegetables, all of it now is going to be changed forever in the coming months. And they've already announced this on across the board. Bill Gates and other people have been trying to do this for 10 to 15 years already. You can go back and look at the dates that they wanted to modify fruits and vegetables. And I'm not talking about the classical gene modification. What I'm talking about is messenger RNA technology. And that's what they're changing over. So there's a certain thing that was an additive or a reaction to what the humans are dealing with. And so a certain amount of people didn't receive that. But they are now going to receive it through their food. And this is what they're talking about at the World Economic Forum, is how to destroy the classic world that we've lived in, our food production, our culture, even the right to reproduce, and replace it in a 5 to 10 year plan like they always do. And they've told us this for years. That's why you get a population of kind of lethargic revolutionists. And what I mean by that is they learn things slowly, year by year. And then, when you tell them something new, they're like, oh, yeah, I know that. I realize that. But in the meantime, incrementalism is happening and it's forever changing. And the propaganda is years behind the actuation of the plan. So the plan is in full swing right now. And, I was watching Cottrell, and he kind of tied it in about the way that their failing economy is and some of the things that are not making sense, including various different versions of something going on over there that has different characteristics, meaning symptoms like, I don't know, let's say white lungs or bleeding eyes or, different things like that may or may not even be the same thing that the entire world was propagandized to worry about. I hope I kind of tied that in together because where we're going right now is that they know that they can reduce the population. They know that they can control the import export of all countries, including all of the food that gets moved around, unless you're growing it yourself. They have to complete and total control on the amount of power that you can or cannot use. And if you've seen the recent events that's going on, the fad of shutting down gas-powered, stoves and things like that, people think that's never going to happen. Let me tell you, states are already passing bills to make that happen, including cities that are doing it. So this is going to happen. It is happening. And this is the way that they roll this out, is a slow reduction of the entire population everywhere. And this is something that we're watching unfold. So they're going to set up multiple situations in which people are left, to survive by themselves in different scenarios all over the world. And I think what they're going to do is initiate a war in probably Taiwan after we have more than just the trench warfare, which is, if you haven't seen the images on the news, we literally have trench warfare in Europe again. So I don't know. It's weird to see that because, of course, it's reminiscent of World War II, where they had concentration camps where they were practicing medical experiments. And by the way, they never tell you what those experiments were, but they all had to do with genetics and, different compounds that you could introduce into a human's body to change it in one way or another. And at the same time, those same people were going all through the world looking for all of the different best of humanity's DNA. They even set up the Olympics where the Olympians, compete there, the best examples of the humans. And all of the countries participate in this. This is like the UN. And it's so funny, the idea that two sides are actually fighting when all are members of the UN. All are sending representatives to the World Economic Forum, Davos, Bilderberg, etc. This is a global plan. It's right in front of your face. And I think when they blew up those guide stones, that was just to remove that from recent memory and the message that was on it, because it's being implemented. And there's I want to get into maybe the next hour about the false perception that robotics aren't as advanced as they are, because a lot of people think that they're slow, they're clumsy, and they can't do stuff. And I can show you two ideas that show you that they are ready to roll it out. And that means at the end of this population reduction at the hands of humans, they will reset to their new technocratic system, Elysium, really. And if you watch that movie, they're not going to be healing up everybody on the planet, but those poor poverty conditions of hunger and no food that they show on the earth, that's what they're about to give you as a gift.
Yeah, and the robots will be chasing everybody down through the countryside, automated, let them loose. Well, hey, Ransom, I sent you a little video too. Can you check your chat box there? Because, see if you like that video. It's about 5 minutes long.
Yeah,
Saudi Arabia just abandoned the purchase. Yeah, all right. Saudi Arabia abandoned, complete U.S. dollar transactions. So as of Friday of last week, American dollar is no longer the petrodollar, where you could only buy Saudi Arabian oil using dollars only since the 1940s. So let's say somebody like, for example, Spain wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia and participating OPEC partner nations. They would say, oh, we only accept payment in dollars. So then Spain would run off and change some, this is, let's say, before the EU had formed. Change the local currencies, whatever it was. Remember, every single country had individual currencies in the EU or Europe before the EU formed. The pesetas, the liras, you know, all this stuff. The French franc, the German mark. A lot of people might not even remember those currencies. But whatever you had, like you had German marks, you had to go change that into dollars. And then go with those dollars and then go get the oil. Well, that's done now. Saudi Arabia's even said they're going to take gold, they'll take crypto, they'll take the yuan, they'll take euros, they'll take anything for payment now. It's a game open, anything goes. So they just pretty much devalued the dollar overnight by doing that. There's no longer 100% commitment that you have to buy dollars, so there's no longer going to be the need or demand for the dollars. There's going to come flooding home and they'll have to print more of them. But you said something interesting, Ransom, about, you know, it seems like they're changing to their planet, the planet they want, set up their society. You talk about the WEF, et cetera, and these elite parasites to set up their society. Well, it's almost like, you know, the monatomic gold stories of Nibiru to maintain its atmosphere. But the reason that, you know, so if you go follow me with the classic story here for a moment, go back 400,000 years ago or so when gold mining began in South Africa in a much different fashion than we do it today. It used electrogravitics or some sort of frequency vibration to separate the gold actually from the rock, and they didn't mine it the same way we did. That's why there's all those stones, walls down there and things that don't make sense, why there's millions of cattle pens down there when there were only a few 100,000 people supposedly. So every one family built these huge, massive stone walls to create cattle pens for the cattle they would need for 200,000 people, although we're building for millions of people, if you believe the cattle pens thing. Or electrically, you could believe that it was used to extract gold out of there, to spray it into the atmosphere of Nibiru, because they couldn't maintain their atmosphere. So every so often they would swing back and collect the gold from the mining operations. Today, central banks do that work for them. But the geoengineering aspect, you know, our planet's being terraformed right now in many ways, shapes, and forms. So instead of being monatomic gold, think about it being nanoparticulates of aluminum, barium, and strontium. Is it an invasion or is it an invitation? They're setting up they're terraforming to set up the new society of the new whatever beings that are coming here to live in this atmosphere.
Whoa, look.
Not our atmosphere that is our planet, but being terraformed. So I'm wondering, you know, the stories in Nibiru, obviously the planet itself is not in our solar system, or else, you know, our planet would be out near Mars and there'd be a lot of weird things happening. But the tales of spacecraft being, you know, 400,000 years advanced from where we have now for, I wouldn't say interstellar travel, it's the next galaxy, but between vast distances for us that are unthinkable right now. So is it going to be a quote-unquote invasion, or will it be just an invitation to a terraformed planet? Because if you think about that, and apparently the population of said planet Nibiru is not as vast as our own. They're much larger. So even if they were much larger, coming down to a fully habited planet with full oxygen, full vegetative system functioning, that would be a very difficult.
I've seen 100 grand in cash. I took the trip to hell and back. I've been around that bitch. I'm nothing like you. And I've seen lights up in the sky, and I've seen ghosts alone at night. I've seen some things, but they were not.
You know, another direction to go down here with the depop happening with the last year's advanced medicines on the planet, the food. You see the lines in the skies every single day, beautiful blue days in the morning, checkerboard across the skies, with those haze where we just don't have trouble breathing. What it does to your atmosphere and even using ionosphere, because they can prevent that. So terraform the planet. Being able to bend the weather
I've seen the country far and wide. I meet my heroes all the time. I've been around every sun, nothing like you. And I felt diamonds in my hands. I've got a couple million fans. I met some folks, but they were none like till I walk through walls. Till I walk through walls.
Alien invasion.
'Cause I'm me with you.
Very similar. Terraforming also, at the same time as that stuff drops out, it affects the soil.
I see things I swear to God that I still can't believe. I see shooting stars and crystal balls and magic in the breeze. Nothing's quite like you. Till I'm a ghost.
The bodies of people of old compared to ours, I mean, it's just no difference. Ours are polluted and broken down more just from the environmental stresses and pollutions around it on purpose. Because, it makes me laugh. Every one of these companies all talking green. Dude, you're the Fortune 500. The whole reason we have all the pollution and all the problems on the planet is because of your business practices and what you made and produced over the last 100 years that have got us to this place on purpose. Because you can't tell me that 30 years ago, they already knew what plastics were. I mean, almost what we see today, except for the robotics, like the chemistry moving forward, the basics that we would need a society to function were already invented through the 30s and 40s and after the war. It could have stopped there, and we'd still be living amazing lives, far less pollution. All the research that the Germans did on electrogravitics and, Schauberger principles and vortices and, torsion physics on how things spin off those vortices and power other things, and magnetic motors and magnetic levitation and different things using the Earth's magnetic field. Like that was already really established science at the end of World War II. But they took us down this road, terraformed the planet through quote unquote industrialization and bettering of lives. Like, look, you got an air conditioner now. Look, well, I do like AC, but there's a million other things that you could think of that we didn't really need around, but it makes your life better. But look at all the pollution. They terraformed from the ground during the economic revolution of the planet. They terraformed from the ground in the green revolution of agriculture. They terraformed from the ground with microplastics in the oceans. In the top, say, 1 mile of Earth atmosphere of all the pollutants that have been chucked up there by just factories and things. And then you got a next level up, which is the geoengineering of just nonstop rain down of metals for 15 years. A good 5 that I can remember to hit serious every day. A good 5 years of just raining down metal every single day. And now you got everybody medically just not evenly keeled any longer and the food supply diminishing. I really believe what you said, Ransom, brought me to this point here, setting up their society, their terraform planet to bring their people here. So is it really is it an invasion, or have we already been invaded? Because perhaps Nibiru doesn't work as a planet anymore and they need to find a new home. So that thing will swing by as a dead planet next time. There'll be no inhabitants, no atmosphere, no nothing. Maybe they reach the critical point where their atmosphere will collapse even with monatomic gold injection. And our planet is habitable enough where they're coming here. And you got to look at it. Everything in play, points to this terraforming of our planet. It's well beyond. Then the technocratic thing would, to be to control the humans and track them as the Anunnaki return back to the planet. There'd already be a track and trace system for the invitees of the Anunnaki to return in mass. And then they go, okay, we already tracked all the humans. It's cool. You can go about your day without being worried about 8 billion of them attacking you like ants rolling over. There's only a few 100 million left. They're easy to step on, literally, with a 12-foot girth or something, you know? Massive swords, 20 feet tall, skeletons, you know, the legends and the stories from this interaction with Nibiru and the Anunnaki. So what I wanted to do was look at this EDC survival bundle. How does this enhance your life by having this? Or how does it give you more peace of mind by having this? Or how does it make your family safer by having this?
Well, if you've ever seen any of those people stuck in the blizzard, believe it or not, I could take a car apart with what I see there.
Yeah, for me, the compass would be the most handy thing because you actually need to know where you're going. And even when I was traveling, I would always get a paper map. And if I didn't have a compass, that's fine. I would still try to orient myself with the sun, even in a city or whatnot between the buildings. But to have a compass, you can look at a paper map that, you know, like somebody gave you a visitor center map of a city you're going to or whatnot. I mean, you're walking around with a compass and a paper map. Any of the thieves are going to be like, leave this person alone. Let's go with somebody who's at least got a phone.
It has a lot of stuff that you would necessarily need. Half of the stuff that you see in this kit is things that I carry on me on a daily basis, just on myself. So that little clip there, the climbing kit, that's a climbing hook. You can use that for fastening anything. Obviously, you need a knife for almost anything. For protection, if you get stuck somewhere and you have to manipulate food or anything like that, you're going to need a flashlight. There's a fire starter. This is just a basic kit that would allow you to start preparing for what's going on around you if something happens. This is those things that you will be happy to have. You'll probably never need it until it happens, and then you're the only person that has tools to manipulate your surroundings around you. And that's very important. And I've said that a lot of times when I've talked to you, that a lot of people mess up on their go bags and their prepping bags by filling it full of fluff stuff, snacks, but that runs out in an hour. And then what are you going to do? How are you going to manipulate anything around you after that? And it's hard to do anything with your bare hands.
Yeah, almost impossible. That's why credit card size tool, you know, there's so many different options for using that. And, you know, we're coming down to like new hex screws with the, you know, when they're decking and that sort of thing. But 90% of our world was built where these tools will pretty much undo anything with a screw or, you know, or a latch, that sort of thing.
Also, you have this miniature fishing kit in here, which if you disregard the bait and the weights, the fishing line itself and the needles work out for an emergency medical stitch yourself up. I mean, if you can do it. I've done it myself. I have several scars on my body from being stuck somewhere where I couldn't get to some hospital or something. Plus, I didn't actually want to go, so I just sewed myself up. And that's exactly what I used was nylon fishing string.
If you get any of those surgical medical kits that you can practice on, and it usually has silicone rubber in there, you can get everything from the silk threads, the cotton threads, and this, yeah, what you're talking about, what you consider fishing line. But remember, you got to sterilize that too. That's where you're going to need some gauze pads at the bare minimum, or at least a little tiny bottle with that alcohol or sterilizing gauze pads, which is included in there too.
Actually, with that paracord there, if you get something more a little severe, like a puncture, if you've ever been hiking, sometimes you fall, you trip, you might get stabbed by some wood or rock and get quite a big gash. If you actually had to use a tourniquet, per se, you can unwind that paracord in that survival thing and tie up any extremity long enough to get somewhere so you don't bleed out. And that's like the main problem when people get injured somewhere, is losing blood, even on a small wound.
Yeah, and then it comes to like procuring food. I mean, how do you even start the fire? I'm happy it has a fire starter in there. Remember, the main thing is you got to remove that black coating off your ferro rod before it'll strike. When I first got those things, when I just started even learning what it was, I would try to strike it even with the black coating on it. And I'm like, this thing doesn't, first when you start it, use that serrated edge and then scrape some of that off where you're going to strike from fire. And then you need some food. Hey, a fish would be good. You can cook those on a fire.
Right. Well, basically, this gives you enough small tools in a small package that you could have a little bit of peace of mind if you ever got stuck anywhere. You know, most survival experts agree that the number one thing that is a problem is a psychological issue. And when you have a fire and you can manage to get a little bit of food and you have the small tools like a compass and a knife and things, it really reassures your mind that you can cope with any situation that you come across. at least a little bit, rather than just being kind of stuck there with the lint in your pockets, wondering what you're going to do, because human beings don't do too good in the wilderness by themselves. We need tools. And this has all the little basic tools that you might need for any small emergency.
Yeah, that's the EDC bundle, 21-piece survival kit by Frog and Company. Click on that link in the description box below, anywhere you're listening or viewing our stream here.
Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of many Ice Age conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, right here with Ransom Godwin, Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight, Revolution Radio, Studio A. Talking about not just politics, that's a lot of people talking about, but how does it weave into a wider picture of the things we're experiencing with the food shortages, the known cycles within not only the solar system, but points wider within galaxies. I'm right over here on Electroverse to start us off. Central America endures record cold. China hitting the first 50 degrees Celsius below zero since 1969. Afghanistan having the massive freeze, just like we had in the United States and Canada, parts of Mexico here, that massive super freeze around Christmas. Well, they're having the same thing over Kazakhstan and that part of Eurasia, where that cold is going all the way down to the seaside in Pakistan. Major winter storm across there. So, their winter wheat was out and will be damaged also, just like ours was here in the U.S. And trying to weave these ideas together, a lot of times platforms that you might be on will not be happy about that, and they'll want you to either, correct your speech to fit the narrative, or they'll just remove the video. So, or the podcast, or it's more the mainstream controlled platforms that would remove and not allow you to have conversations like this. They just don't want you to connect so many dots, because an aware person suddenly becomes a spreader of information, or somebody who wants to go deeper into, whoa, that little bit's wrong. I bet there's way more wrong. So, what else could be a falsity, a falsehood? Almost all of it now. I mean, everywhere you look across, just life in general seems that it's been so planned and nothing organic. Is it the Truman Show that we're truly in now? These 15-minute cities will be just thousands of Truman Shows all over the place, because they'll never even know that there's another city even 15 minutes away if they don't have the maps and things. That's why they want to, control the internet, control the speech, control the thoughts, control the conversations. But Revolution Radio is still allowing us to speak freely tonight. Thank you for allowing that. And if you consider free speech something that you also support, Revolution Radio, many ways to donate right there on the front page for you, freedomslips.com. Now, as we were, talking about the last hour, this Hunga Tonga eruption would start to become visible, where it would affect crop production, and a lot of people would ask, what is happening with this weather? It is so strange and beyond the normal. Talked to a guy up in Michigan today, and he's like, I can't believe it. It's like we're in the middle of spring in Michigan. It's raining outside. It should be snowing. And he's like, something's definitely wrong. There's something wrong. Well, when you're looking down at record cold across Central America, you knew the water vapor was going to cool part of our atmosphere. And the equatorial bands seem to be getting a huge, huge, huge amount of rainfall because of whatever atmospheric disturbance in the southern hemisphere Hunga Tonga put up in terms of atmospheric circulation, mix-up, disturbances, blockages, whatever you like to term that as, where there's a part of the atmosphere that's not moving as fast or in the same way that it did north or south or east or west, and it'll ram into something else up in the sky. Then it's like a billiard ball. Smaller fronts, yeah, they can get moved out of the way, but when you have jet streams looping in on themselves, double jet streams forming out of a single one that bends and forms two out of itself and then reconnects with a gap in the middle, something's out of kilter here. So, Ransom, you had a couple interesting thoughts there about building the world that they want. So take me down this route for a minute. What happens at 2030? Because a lot of these plans, agendas, or whatever, they're on this roadmap to bring us out to 2030 with dripping incrementalism. But then after 2030, there's a lot of talk about Douglas Vogt and the work that he's done on the micronova event that's poised to, hit Earth 2049, if you believe the research, or if you would like to take a look deeper into recurring cycles. We start to see this. So if this Agenda 2030 is Plan 2030, whatever you like to call it, if it reaches its point in there in the 2030 to 2035, then 10 years after that, it seems that there is going to be some sort of massive solar system event that will change the planet forever. I mean, the amount of plasma and particles and discharge coming off of that actually fries the sun-facing side of the planet to 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit for minutes to an hour. Like, imagine the amount of water vapor that would put up if it hit over the Pacific Ocean. Like, sheesh. These are the kind of things that are forecast for 2049 off of solar physicists and others that follow cataclysms and recurring cycles of cataclysms. The Adam and Eve story, for example, depicts and talks about this same exact cataclysm. 2049 is exactly the same that Adam and Eve book described. So, Ransom, walk me out there on a timeline. Walk me down the plank, man, with your sword in my back. Take me down there past 2030.
Yeah, I think that's the right number of years. All of the stuff that I've read going back to prior to 2000 had the years 2025, 2030, 2050 as the main marker posts for the transformation of civilizations, according to the think tanks and, all of those. Obviously, no plan goes off without a hitch. So what they do, obviously, is redundancy. That's something that anybody that's dealt with anybody in the military knows that they hammer into everybody. And even the dependents and the family members kind of, as a secondary, get this weird training of redundancy. And I grew up in a military family. My grandparents were military. My dad was military intelligence. And just the whole, that's where I've got a lot of my attitude also about being prepared about things, to plan for the future, not for a future that is going to be for sure, but multiple redundant contingencies to deal with different aspects of different futures. And that's the way we should be living, from top to bottom, is this idea of preparedness and, thinking about different scenarios, because I don't think any number of one of these plans or all of them are going to happen or necessarily. However, we do know that things get pulled off. And if you live in a certain area, you have to deal with it. Just think about the people in Ukraine right now. Everybody likes to talk about Ukraine, but let's think about it from just a basic civilian Ukrainian's point of view, with no political agendas whatsoever, for or against or anything like that. They're dealing with food shortages. They dealt with severe cold nights because the power was gone. Now, let's come over in the United States. We just had, several nice weather patterns. We're probably going to have several more this winter. And every single time that one of these events happen, regardless of what the WEF is planning, regular people have to deal with those situations. Power outages, stagnant water. I mean, the list goes on. And thankfully, so far, we've lived in a civilized first world country, at least here, where there was some sort of, help or backup. But, the way that they're designing things right now, it is exactly a design. And I no longer, believe in coincidence when it comes to governance of any kind. There is no coincidence. There's no mess ups. There's no accidents. When corruption happens, they meant to do it. When seemingly incompetent things happen, generally they were planned to be exactly that way. You can use several examples, maybe the withdrawal of Afghanistan, or things like that. And it puts us in this unique situation. On the last hour, I had some kind of glitch out where a different browser came on and started playing my YouTube channel. So sorry about that. For the whatever it was, 2 or 3 minutes that happened, but I turned it off, so I had to turn off everything to find it. And I had some stuff lined out, but I was going to show, but I guess I could just talk about it. If you were looking at the globe in, from an outside point of view, like if you pulled yourself out into the orbit of the Earth and you're just looking down on it, and you're not listening to the propaganda whatsoever. All you're looking at is data. Say you were an alien species and you flew up in a ship and you scanned, the planet kind of like they do in Star Trek. Oh, what's down there? Well, it's a, post-industrial civilization before whatever. They don't have this technology, but they're a technological civilization down there. And then you start looking at, their agricultural sciences and their weaponry and government movements from an outside point of view. And what you would see is there's two spots, namely Russia and the United States, if you just want to name a country and not their associations with other, platforms or groups or whatever. And they are pumping weapons all over the world in certain directions to countries that have opposing ideas or cultural beliefs to the other country near them. And this is what they're doing. So this is in the background. So if you're just looking at the data and then you see, oh, well, they're closing down food production. Now, why would they be doing that? Like from an outside point of view, you wouldn't think that it would make sense for a big population to start cutting food production or accessibility to food. And you could probably see it happening from orbit due to the way that people are trading different, the farms looking different from like a satellite point of view. You would be wondering, why are you doing that? And the only answer to all of these questions, regardless of incompetence or if you think things happen on accident or coincidentally, you would see the world pushing all nations on Earth to destabilize at the same time as reducing the amount of food and providing in a certain way access to new ailments or diseases that accompany not having food and nutrition. So right now, like if you were just looking and you scanned the United States per se, you would probably judge it like, well, why are they doing that? Like, why do they put these substances in their foods and waters and things like that? It wouldn't make sense unless you were looking at it from a reduction population perspective. Like if the United States or any country you pick was like a chicken house, let's say, where they raise chickens, you have a population that's going to be a product. They are going to be a product. That's all the chickens. So that's us in there. And they come in and they tamper with the environment. They change the air quality. They force everybody into a centralized area. They give them food-like supplements, which is like these weird powders and stuff that they give them that has the grain and the nutrition and whatever the chickens are supposed to eat until they become full-size chickens. And then mechanically they come in with like little machines and they suck up the entire population and it goes for process. The next thing that happens is a new batch of an entire population in that building. Now, if there's any problems with genetics or any other thing, this is the thing that they do every time. It doesn't matter if it's a fungal outbreak, a bacterial outbreak, a viral outbreak, or there's a lot of damaged chickens, like say, a weather pattern came in and messed it up. They will cull the entire thing to get the product that they want. And in this way, we're exactly the same as the human population. And what they're doing is going for a total broke, destruction of society, which obviously is not going to happen if you still want to live on the earth in, like an overnight apocalypse where they just nuke every city on the earth. Instead, they would have different little programs going to fit the needs of the area. So, like if you wanted to destabilize the United States, you might, I don't know, flood in millions of people from other countries. You might flood in millions of tons of deadly narcotics that are addictive. You might raise the prices on everything. You might, do all of these different things that incorporate reducing the ability for the population to succeed normally. So they're doing this everywhere. Everywhere's got their own little independent situation growing right now that would set them up for destabilization, whether it's in South America with what's going on there, the overturning of governments and different things going to a new attitude. Also there you see the reduction of food growing and stuff. You got Africa. There's turmoil constantly in Africa, overchanging of governments and issues like that. You go to the Middle East, and they have set that up for a large-scale war there. And then you just push north, and that's where millions and millions more people went to countries with low populations. And these are young military-age men that have nothing really to do. There's not jobs per se. They're cutting back the economies to make it even a worse situation where they cannot absorb the populations. Now, if everybody gets sick and hungry during this time, obviously that pushes these other agendas forward even faster. But at some point, it's going to level off and they're going to try to go back to normal at the other side of the reset. And when they do that, they've already set up these mechanized systems where everything is different, a completely top-down tracking, tracing system to force consumers. You can look around the world, and any country that has ever opposed this consumer technocracy driven by the central banks has been destroyed. So now they're going for broke and doing it to the entire world so that they could restart with a digital currency that's connected to every aspect of how you live your life, from your food to your medical ability to get help or treatments, to being able to travel from here to there. Now they did the beta run. They're done with that. Whatever comes next will be the actual program that's meant to change society from the top down and from the bottom up. The entire thing, rewriting borders, rewriting population numbers, rewriting rules and laws. And it was all laid out there in the Georgia Guidestone. And that's why I keep bringing that up, because that was an in-your-face prediction of a plan that they obviously and seemingly had for quite some time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to study it. And in all esoteric circles, you know the rule that you have to tell people what you're going to do to them. And they do that daily and nightly. Yes, they throw a lot of distraction, and they may overfear one topic or another, but let's get real. These situations are happening to human beings on the earth. And to sit back in one of the Western countries, kind of with your thumb up your butt and the blinders on, believing that destabilization can't happen to you in your countries, that's obviously naive, and it's not reality, because you can look at Europe now versus 20 years ago. You can look at the United States now versus 20 years ago, or Australia or New Zealand or Japan or South Korea. Any of the countries previously you thought were the essence of the free, civilized world, and you can see that they're destabilizing them culturally, morally, and more importantly, with the intake of actual real substance, i.e. food and clean water. And I guess you could add the idea of healthy ideas with that, because, you can't have a body without a mind, and you can't have a mind without a body. So both of these have to be in concert and in good health. And every scenario that they're pushing forward on this planet is destruction, destabilization. And if they're not directly, taking food out of your mouth, so to speak, with a war or famine, something like that, they are devolving the food or making the food not real. So whenever you're eating it, obviously you're going to have problems, because you're eating that, it's going to your gut, that's affecting your mind. And then on top of that, the programming to keep your mind busy with fear, anxiety, doubt, and all of these things. And any religion or philosophy that you look at throughout history all agreed on one thing, and that's what you think about all day is what you are. So if fear, anxiety, war, greed, the fear of losing everything, everything changing, if that's constantly fed to the population, that's what it becomes. So it's a completely programmed and planned event, and they made sure to coincide it with the natural cycles of the earth to get the maximum effect of their programs. If we can't have a healthy mind and a healthy body, no one on this earth, you can get spiritual with it. Just think about the soul draining aspect of that, because I do know that a lot of people really believe in the positive and negative aspects of spirituality, and that there may or may not be entities, and whether they are or they aren't, you still get drained one way or the other by, certain things, people and things like that. So if you could make an entire society of suffering, even on a small scale, just agitation, you can control the entire populace. And basically, we're at a turning point in evolution where you're going to have to choose to be a wolf or a sheep. And what I mean by that is the sheep is a very useful domesticated animal that provides a product, meat, the wool, etc. And that animal has a very good short lifespan. It's taken care of from birth to death. It has a little guardian like a police, the little sheepdogs that are out there making it move here and there. And it lives in borders, and they give it medications and vaccines and whatever it needs in its short little life. Now, the wolf, on the other hand, is out there in the cold. He's out there adapting, learning how to survive. Every meal is up to him to have, up to him to get. Every failure, every triumph is his to have. The difference between those is that's what we call wild or domesticated. But we all know what happens to the domesticated sheep. It ends up in the slaughter. It ends up being a product. And that's the position that they're trying to put human beings in on the other end of this restart. And they have plenty of control mechanisms, so to speak, to be the sheepdog to keep us, navigating within the boundaries of their own world creation that they have given us. I myself would rather be a wolf. I'd rather risk starving or succeeding because I won't be in the slaughterhouse. I don't know. Does that kind of tie in my thoughts of the future? I think it's very possible for a large portion of the population to grow their own food, to educate themselves, to keep their own vibrations in a positive, productive idea. And like I said, all philosophies on earth, or wise men or theologians, all agree on is that you are what your mind thinks about all day. So therefore, if you have goals, you have aspirations, you have the willingness to produce your own products for you and your family, meaning the food and the lifestyle that you want, with no outside control factors, no sheepdogs telling you what you can and can't do about how you eat, about how you live. That is the only way forward for, human beings to resist this great reset. We all have to be in that same mindset that we can produce, and we don't want to be the product. We're not the product. We are the producers. And that's what the entire planet has forgotten. And that's what they keep everyone from trying to remember, because they want to restart civilization where human beings are just a product that's forced to buy and sell and take part in all of their programs, because their livelihood's tied up in a digital currency that technically doesn't even exist in the real world.
Yeah, and I wish I could have, maybe I'll take this episode here and I'll have the episode transcribed onto paper, and we will print it out, however many pages it is, 50, 70 pages after talking for 2 hours, 10,000 words or so. And I'll do that week after week, month after month, until I get volumes, and then I'll encase them in my wall in my log cabin. And then when somebody remodels the place in about 100 years or whatever, they'll find the actual journals describing real history. And I'm wondering how different that would be from what they were fed. I'm sure by that time, if they were to find those journals talking about the past the way we see it and what's happening now, that would be deemed illegal. You'd have an illegal artifact. And then you remodeled your home with the truth in it. Speaking of truth, I had a couple things, when you were talking there, this being more self-sufficient and coming off on our own here. I had a question for you about redundancy. I was talking to somebody recently about comms redundancy just on the internet, to have a hardwired landline coming in, cable coming in, hardwired cable, phones that could ping a tower, that could have a hotspot to share with others around. So that's a second option. Third option would be to have Starlink, obviously. So those are like a triple redundancy. So Ransom, I'm asking the question here. If you needed to create power to recharge devices, so you're not talking about powering an entire house. You're talking about having steady enough power supply. So anything that you need to repower that would have rechargeable batteries or, computers and this kind of thing would all be taken care of. So I was looking at generator as my first line of defense, solar panels for recharging for the second line of defense. But then, what's the third line of defense? I can't try. And these are the things that if you've figured them out, then a lot of the issues here will not happen immediately if you were able to get to a more secure, further away place. It's not about you're going to avoid this for the rest of your life and civilization is not going to change. It absolutely is going to sweep over eventually. I mean, take a look at America itself. From, let's say, 1800 to now, do you think the changes, like, the Native Americans or the indigenous here, maybe they thought that, okay, we'll just pull really far back in the forest, and then this whatever madness of invasion and stealing of buffalo for the tongues or whatever, that'll pass us over if we just chill in the forest. If we get far enough back, these rampaging people in wooden wagons with wheels coming down this way, like, what? If we just get far enough out, and they keep telling us in the newspapers, they're coming. But eventually, even if it's decades plural, this still sweeps over the planet. It's just changed the way it is, because you could look at every chapter from the 1800s, moving into the introduction of electricity. And, I even have those stories, which I've told a couple of times about East Tennessee. There's a few famous areas where they tried to bring in electric lines and they were shot out, beat out, tomahawk, I shouldn't even say tomahawk, but just axe thrown out, these kind of thing for decades, plural. But eventually, the electric lines came through. No matter how hard they pushed back, they were again then isolated into their own the community kept getting smaller because they're like, whoa, they got electricity. Look down in the valley. Oh, they're electric at night. They can work longer. They can educate more. They can do this. We need electricity too. And then the whole thing about, we got to fight against the electricity. It just kind of, I wouldn't say it died out. There was a few hardcore families and communities that said no, but then they brought in the police and military after that to put the electric lines through here. You can stave this off for some period of time. Again, it's not going to be, like Ransom said, or even myself, boom, it's not going to be an instant thing. It is going to get you to that point where you can then figure out how this change is happening and move with it. Like some of these disturbances that are inbound are absolutely going to shock people to not even take next steps to do anything. They're just going to get shocked and told what to do, and then they're going to do it. It doesn't matter where they're told to move to. If they have to abandon their neighborhoods, you need to go to this sector, you need to go to that camp, you need to do this place or this relocation zone or whatever. They're just going to do it. And in that whole thing, that's going to take a decade or more to, unveil itself and put it into motion. Eventually, they will be at your doorstep, but will it be 20 years from now? Some areas really never have changed that much. I mean, yeah, there's electricity lines, and yeah, there's a law out here, and yeah, there's the revenuers now. But really, just in general, it hadn't changed that much. There's other places where there's massive changes happening. Now, how prepared are you to weather some of these changes? So, Ransom, that was my thing about the triple redundancy. If you have these things, you're going to be able to go for quite a bit longer and not be reliant on other systems just by even having something as simple as recharging devices for all your comms gear. At least at that level where you're going to need to recharge things on a daily, all the time, of something that draws a little more power perhaps, but not, enough to light up your house and cook and get your oven going with solar panels. Nothing like that. So I got Ransom, like I said, I got the generator, I got the solar panels for recharge, but what's the third one? What am I missing? Where's my hole? I need something emergency to give me power to recharge devices.
Well, I don't know about you, but if I have things for lighting and stuff like that. I live in an area that's probably not going to get too extreme in the cold direction, but in the hot direction. So I'm not really super worried about that. I have that covered too, and if I needed to move, I could, be outside or whatever. But for charging stuff, I actually had created a little system here from being poor. And basically, I at first I couldn't afford the gizmos and gadgets. I still don't. I mean, I still need. There's lots of holes. Every time you look at your redundancy plans, you'll find holes every time you go through it, and then you'll think, oh, well, what if this happens? So you try to fix that before it comes up. But as far as like lights and radios, a good idea, lights, radios, and etc. A good idea, and I know this from, like I said, planning kind of in a cheap way from ground up, is I went out of my way to find a lot of solar lights that take AA or the flashlight batteries inside of it. So I went out of my way to make sure that I got the right sizes where everything's interchangeable, meaning that you could just take the back panel off of any number one of the lights outside or all of them, and do if you need a lot of batteries, and in one day you have all your batteries charged up. You could do it that way. But let's get serious. What if eventually all that stuff's going to break? So in the long term, you have to go back to old school. I know I could wire up an alternator and sit there and wind it manually until I had a battery to charge other things. I could do that, to get going in a car that doesn't have a live battery, as long as the cell's good in the battery. But that's what we're, kind of facing is there's different stages of this. You need to have preparedness for what do I do right now? You need preparedness for, what if I have to go somewhere and stay there for a while? And then also, what is your long-term plans? Like, I have redundant bags. There's a bag for everything in case of different scenarios. Like I have 5 different go bag types that I've tried to put stuff in there for different scenarios. Like I have one that I carry around in my vehicle always, just about, that has a gas mask, water filtration, etc. Not because I'm worried of like some weird chemical attack or something like that, but what if I was driving through the mountains and a forest fire happened? I want to breathe. I want to be the guy that gets out of it. So any number of those things. But back to the lights. If you go out of your way to get survival gear that's interchangeable, meaning that the same parts will work on the other things, or the same batteries will switch over, then you know that you have like 20 or 30 different options to try to put something together. Now, obviously, if things get really bad, kind of like what you were talking about, the Native Americans, different tribes would try to retreat, hide, and some of them tried to fight up front, which it didn't work out for anybody. And that's because it was an overwhelming, nonstop force of progression, so to speak, in their era. We are facing the same thing. It's a technocratic push into all areas. If you haven't noticed, it doesn't matter how remote you live. You will find out that they're putting up 5G towers, etc. They're doing this. They're making infrastructure. I live way out of the way, away from stuff, and they've had fiber optics buried in the ground for 15 plus years here. So they're not even using it, but it's set up. It's a redundancy of civilization or infrastructure that the government does do and companies do, which is weird because kind of like the guy that was talking about what a scam global warming and the rise of sea water is in this time period. If that were true, he points out the banks wouldn't keep loaning people money. The banks wouldn't keep investing in those areas because they know that there's going to be disaster after disaster, but they know that it's not going to be the kind of disaster that, they're not going to still want to be on top of any kind of financial system or ownership of land. So if you're trying to hide back, and get around a situation, and you got to keep in mind that almost all situations, they come and they go. And you can look back in history to almost every disaster. And obviously, because you're here today, some of the people survived. That's just a given. But let's show some examples. There are plenty of examples around the world of how populations kind of hid and started surviving, and they had to live on the run. World War II was actually one of those. Large populations were moving around in the forests of Europe trying to avoid the war for whatever reason, just to move because the war showed up. And one day they were on their property that they owned, that they had lots of redundancies in their lifestyle set up for food and for heat but it didn't matter because their area was forever changed in an instant. Now, this can happen from war or a natural disaster, etc. It doesn't matter if you have at least 15 different ways to be prepared. And let's be honest, it doesn't matter how much you prepare. Not everybody's going to be successful all the time. But me, myself, I would rather have lots of options. So like say the power grid went out here right now. I'm fine. I got lights. I mean, I got lights to do stuff. I got things to make heat. I have a big generator. But before I even used any of that big stuff, I wouldn't want to be attracting attention. Obviously, if everybody's having hard times, we've seen that people will steal from one another for small things. People have been killed for $20 a pair of shoes when hard times weren't even really that bad. So imagine what they'll do to feed their children. Imagine what they'll do to feed themselves. Imagine what they'll do to feel secure and have their own mental state. If they don't have things, they may just take your things because it'll make them feel better about the situation the same way it does you. So lots of redundancies. I have like a lot of solar lights that take, like I said, the same batteries that fit in the radios that I have. It's the same batteries that fit into the flashlights I have. So I could get out there, but always you want to have something that is not dependent on batteries, so to speak. So like a charging system, there's pocket sockets out there, the little cranking ones that you could charge your stuff for communication on the go. There's other things like that. But in the long run, people do survive, and then the war goes or the disaster passes, and then they have to rebuild and start doing stuff. And without some of the items that they had, they probably wouldn't have been able to do that. Even in the past, we could go back all the way to the Clovis culture. Now, we don't know what happened to them per se, but we know that they knew the idea of redundancy. And we know that because they put caches of flint and seed and different things all over North America. They had redundancy after redundancy, and they didn't, try to carry the whole field and everything with them. What they did is they carried small amounts, basically, essentially to our time, a go bag with everything that they needed for their world, and they would stash those different places. That's not a bad idea to do for yourself, but they understood the idea of redundancy. If something happens here, we'll go here. If something happens there, we'll go here. And almost all native societies have learned to deal with living on the move and having redundancies and backups. Of course, one of the first things that you need to take care of is your ability to filter water. That's number one. Once you get that taken care of, then you can start worrying about other stuff. But water is number one. So like a life straw, not just one life straw, but 20 or 30 of them. And, you were pointing out a minute ago, how people save, like they have knife collections, they got tool collections, etc. Wouldn't it be nice for you to know that you have enough equipment, not only for yourself, but to give to friendly help or people that you've set up in your communities or friendships that you've made, where you have enough stuff to give them so that you can work as a unit or a small community. All of these are good ideas, but it's obvious because we're still here today that millions of human beings throughout the past have understood the idea of redundancy and planning ahead for things that may or may not happen. And I actually think that's what the entire Göbekli Tepe monuments are for, is that was, ancient man's idea to tell the future that this thing happened. It happened, it was real, and if you don't prepare for it, you might end up like what happened to their world, which was total devastation, probably on several cycles of thousands of years. You could go back to probably 50,000 years ago when we were getting lots of hits, and that progressed all the way. A lot of people don't realize this, but 50,000 years ago, all the way up to about 12,000 years ago, there was several periodic bombardments of the Earth of one kind or another, several disasters. Probably they were all linked, but that's not necessarily true. Like there was obviously a giant global flood, because that's in the memory of every ancient civilization. There's ideas of fire falling from the sky, stars falling from the sky, however they depicted it. And also the evidence of all of the, squatter man petroglyphs around the world that tells us that the magnetic field and the sun, just in recent memory of mankind, has acted different at times. And you can take an example from the other humans, Neanderthal, that disappeared. They might not have been as good at redundancy as human beings. Just saying.
Yeah, and what would the redundancies be that you might need in different altitudes on your land? Would you leave one halfway up your mountain and then one at the top? Or, and how would you disguise it from somebody, illegal hunter or whatever, illegal ginseng bandits cruising through the forests? Hard to say. But the redundancies for sure would definitely be something with water. If you can only put like 3 things in a redundancy pack, just 3, that's it. And that's all you could do. Is like a little, something small, real tiny that you could stock away. So something with water filtration for sure. Something with cleanliness, a little tiny little boo-boo kit or medical kit, like a little small one. And then, some way to start a fire for sure. If you could do those 3 things, then you could pretty much, and a knife, obviously, but then you could really start to work with your environment if you had those things taken care of right away, where you knew you could get fresh, clean water without getting sick. You knew that you could start a fire, and you got a knife so you could go at least know your local area, what root crops you could go dig out and at least get some nutrition in, or cut off some branches that you could use, go find the, pine needles for tea and go look for the wild blueberries or whatever. Cattails, depending on what kind of seasons. There's like all kind of edibles that, at least that would give you the start to then make it a little bit distant journey from where you establish that little base camp at, I think. But, let me read you the reason I would say I think, because the weather systems aren't exactly as we know them to be. So perhaps it might be cooler in the summer, it might be something like this that would catch you off guard. But just an example of this, was it January 19th today? All right, I'm going to read you just a few headlines from January 18th, January 17th, and January 16th. Just like these last few days of climate extreme headlines here. Arctic air encases Europe, Russia freezes, their freeze intensifies to 80.9 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. Delhi record cold. Arizona and Nevada, and the had CRU data tampering. So I'll have to see what that's all about. I didn't really dig into the article. I'm just reading the head. The had crew is had CRU. That is a different temperature monitoring that does the global temperatures by the set. So you can get the University of Alabama, Huntsville, the GISS. That's the global. And that's monitored over there by NOAA. And then you got HAD crew, and then you got climate reanalyzer. And there's a few other data sets that you can go for. And let's see, on the 17th, just a day prior, historic cold in Cuba. Are you kidding me? Record cold across India. Delhi freezes. Pakistan, they had some of the coldest, and Iran also, some of the coldest weather. Just like we had that super freeze at Christmas, they just experienced the same thing down to the seaside where it started to fog off of Pakistan. Like record cold coming down, and then it hit that seawater and just getting massive fog banks out of this extreme cold. Gas shortages, heavy snow transforms European landscapes. 33 feet of snow in California, some towns buried. See how quickly the drought alleviated from California, if I might continue with. It was a record drought. And then suddenly they're at massive floods, and you're getting, arc storm after arc storm and 33 feet of snow, which will translate into melt off run water. And then if I go back to the 16th, heavy snow in South Korea. Russia logs its coldest January temperature since 1982. Feet of snow, and then they go into a cooling in Australia article. They showed 0.13, or a little over a tenth of a degree cooling on average per decade on long-term temperature series coming out of Australia. They were probably unhappy to hear that because the global warming rah-rah squad. And look at Al Gore. I pulled this one off of, where was I over at here? Zero Hedge. Al Gore trying to pull off a Greta Thunberg moment. This clown goes on. He's been so wrong about so many things since that one movie, Inconvenient Truth. And anything that you want to try to debate, it's just the forecast that this guy put out, that none of it occurred. I mean, really, this guy's almost batting zero, except that the Earth will still spin or something, really. So he's claiming that greenhouse gases. Now, get this. I'm still shocked by what I hear. This is Al Gore that's saying this, former political figure in America here. The combined emissions of greenhouse gases are trapping as much extra heat as 600,000 Hiroshima bombs every day. Trapped heat in the atmosphere. 600,000 Hiroshimas going off every day of extra heat trapped in the atmosphere. And that's what he says. And then he says, according to this, the oceans are boiling, creating rain bombs and atmospheric rivers, resulting in millions of climate refugees. And then he just continues into this rant on how xenophobic it is that Hiroshima could be used to describe Hiroshima, which he just described using Hiroshima as the number of bombs versus, I'm going to go Hiroshima on you. He was actually gets a pass in the hall pass of woke because he compared it only to 600,000 Hiroshima classic atomic bombs exploding every day, adding that much heat to the atmosphere, not using it in a derogatory fashion like, you talk to me like that, I'm going to throw a bunch of facts and go Hiroshima on you. That is xenophobic. Now explain the logic on that one. The same guy said the same thing in two different sentences. Like, what? This is the lunacy.
He's like one of the biggest clowns out there.
Oh, I just am like, I had to laugh when I read that. I had to laugh, chuckle, ha, ha, ha. But look at all the cooling that's happening. Got the biggest eruption in the last 200 years just occurred a year ago. Crops are starting to fail because of that. Ozone hole is going to expand because of that. And this clown's trying to get his Greta moment on.
Yeah, the whole world's a stage. I'm sure you saw that setup photo op with Greta there at the what was it, a coal factory or something like that, where the cops were out there waiting and holding her and posing, and they're all smiling, and it's a whole propaganda piece. And how could you believe Al Gore anyway? I mean, think about him. He got his fortune, after losing to George W. Bush, right? And he started up that green investment firm thing. This is worth like $36 billion now. And this is the same guy that said that, by 2013, we wouldn't even have the polar ice caps and snow would be a thing of the past. And if you lived on the coast, you would be underwater, and all of that silliness that didn't even happen. And he's got the gall to come on there as an actor and start kind of, raising his voice at everybody. And acting like he's really got something to say. It's, the world is a stage, and he's one of the corniest actors out there.
Hey, wait a second for that. Can I say something, Ransom, with that? When I say he was trying to get his Greta moment, he was more like, remember that when she goes, "You have stolen my childhood." That is exactly what he was trying to get, is that kind of "how dare you" moment to get people to remember him forever. 600,000 Hiroshima bombs a day in the atmosphere.
Would it be cool if some young girl got an opportunity to, talk to him, and when he was saying something, and they said, "How dare you? You have stolen my investment plan." No, I'm just
joking. Give me back my deposit box.
He's made $36 billion in that firm. That's personal wealth. I think it's like $330 million for being a climate alarmist who has a track record of nothing coming true. I mean, basically, can you name one prediction that Al Gore's made in the past 25 to 30 years that has come true? Not one of them, because he's silly. He's pushing a fake agenda. And then back to what you were talking about of the flooding in California. I sent you a link from, I think it's talking about Minnesota, if I'm right. But anyway, they're talking about the massive amounts of, it's from Minnesota. They're talking about the massive amounts of precipitation and what's going to happen this spring. Because let's keep in mind that, although California is flooding, the real flooding season for the mainland U.S. doesn't happen till the spring when all the snow starts melting off. And all of these areas that were supposedly, drought stricken. And you remember in the summer when they were trying to convince us that it's yet again the hottest summer ever, even though it's not. And in recent months, we have not only seen temperatures matching Antarctica in the North American continent, but in Siberia, going down cold as it is on Mars. While they're still trying to make you believe that, it's your fault and cow farts and all of these other, joking sounding ideas that they push out on people. And it's amazing the naivety, or however you say that. I don't think I said that right. How naive people are, that they believe all that stuff and they're willing to do everything from give their wealth away to stop living like a human being and stop trying to, produce anything. And you also have people that believe that they shouldn't even have children. Some of them even talk about suicide. They're gonna kill themselves to save the planet.
Please don't. If you're considering that, please don't. We need you here so much right now to be the solution to this problem. Please do not do that.
Right. How would minusing yourself help anything? Obviously, it wouldn't. But this is the type of fear, that they're pushing down from the top, and it's all just to push people in these little boxes where they're forced to be a consumer for life, believing in fairy tales that if they don't buy this way or don't, reduce their lifestyle in this way, that they're bad for the earth. You can look through history, all of the geologic history of Earth, and we're really at a very nice time in history, and we have been for a while. That may be changing, but we had a pretty stable period compared to all of the other times on Earth. So the idea that, we're messing it up, even though the planet was warming for a period long before humans had the ability to do anything, if you even believe that. And now we're coming to the end of that. And from what I understand, not like it's going to happen overnight, but we're at the end of the interglacial, are we not? Are we not looking forward to another 80,000 years of temperature decline and changes back into a glacial period? Not that that matters for any of us right now, but we're not on the end to worry about like a super ice age like in the past, and I'm not worried about the planet burning up. If anything, the only problem on this earth are the people that control the forces that are destroying the resources that make this planet work. And the idea that cutting down carbon dioxide, which literally is the fuel for the engine of life on Earth, is somehow going to fix things, that's preposterous. I mean, they want to push it down to near extinction levels. If that doesn't tell you exactly their plan, what will? I mean, they tell you in every aspect of everything on how we need to reduce ourselves, because the masses of people that have their own freedoms and ideas is the threat to the feudalist type dictatorship of the world. It doesn't matter what country you live in, you still live in that feudalist style thing, and they're trying to make it more like it used to be. So you would have to live in these compact cities and deal with your lord. Basically, I guess they'll call it a governor of your area. But they get to go to parties, and they get to drink at night, and they get to go to the restaurants, and they get to have armed guards, and they get to have cars drive them everywhere they want to go and fly wherever they want to go. But you should just shut up, sit in your house, watch TV, eat these rations that you got with your ration card, and turn off the heat. You can't use your oven. And bringing that up, I keep getting these emails from my power company telling me what a bad person I am. I should send you a copy of that. They're telling me,
you're terrible,
why don't you eat out of a toaster oven? Your regular oven, it uses too much energy. Why don't you turn off all the lights in your home so you're basically living in a cold cave? You know, like the idea that they want you to revert back to a civilized or a modern lifestyle so that you could allow them, the few, the elite, to have 27 houses with the heat burning and the lights on when nobody's there, while they're all flying on their jets, meeting up to, create conspiracies to starve the population out. That's where we're at. Isn't it funny? All of them getting caught over there in Davos, like Klaus Schwab and the Pfizer CEO, and how choked up they get when anybody asks the simplest, basic question about the reality of the truth that they've created recently. I mean, that tells me that that they're probably on the same end of agitation, or on the other end of it, where the more that people awake, the more agitated they become, because they're in fear of losing their control of the entire system. And they may not have a choice. These changes that are coming to the earth may be something that's out of their control.
Remember, we'll be remembered as the square cave race of humans. Back to your cave, no electricity, no heat. Good night.
Thank you for listening to Revolution